The stranger rode into Tucumcari, New Mexico on the hottest day of August 1883, and from the moment Penelope Parker stepped onto the dusty Main Street, people began crossing to the other side. She sat tall in her saddle despite the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders, her dark hair coming loose from the bun she'd pinned that morning somewhere near the Texas border. The whispers started before she even dismounted, spreading like wildfire through the small frontier town nestled in the high desert plains. "That's her," an old woman muttered from the doorway of the general store. "That's the Parker girl. Heard her whole family died in that fire back in Santa Fe." "Not just died," another voice hissed. "Cursed, they say. Everything she touches turns to ash and ruin." Penelope heard every word. She'd been hearing variations of the same whispers for 3 years now, ever since the fire that claimed her parents and younger brother. Never mind that she'd been 20 miles away at the time, visiting an aunt. Never mind that the marshal ruled it an accident, a knocked-over lantern in the stable. People needed someone to blame for tragedy, and a young woman who survived when her family didn't make an easy target. She tied her mare to the hitching post outside the Tucumcari Hotel with practiced hands, trying to ignore the way mothers pulled their children inside, the way men lowered their voices and turned their backs. She was 22 years old, bone-tired, and running out of places to run. The hotel clerk, a thin man with a prominent Adam's apple, eyed her nervously. "How long you staying?" "Just a few nights. I'm looking for work." Penelope placed $2 on the scarred wooden counter, money she could barely afford to part with. "Work?" The clerk's eyebrows shot up. "Here, I can sew, cook, clean. I'm good with horses, too." She met his gaze steadily, lifting her chin despite the familiar sting of rejection she could already see forming in his expression. "Miss, I don't think anyone in Tucumcari is going to be hiring." He pushed the coins back toward her. "Might be best if you moved on come morning." Penelope's jaw tightened, but she nodded slowly. She'd expected this. She always expected this. "I'll pay for the room either way." The clerk pocketed the money quickly, as if her coins might carry her supposed curse. "Room 3 upstairs. Keep to yourself, and there won't be trouble." Her room was small and sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the street. Penelope dropped her saddlebag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, fighting back the hot pressure of tears. She tried 7 towns in the past year alone. 7 towns, and the story always spread faster than she could establish herself. Someone always recognized her name, or the description of the girl who survived when her family burned. She thought of her mother's laugh, her father's steady hands as he worked in his carpentry shop, her brother Tommy's endless questions about everything under the sun. 3 years gone, and the grief could still knock the wind from her lungs when she let her guard down. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it cautiously to find a young girl, no more than 10, with braids the color of wheat and eyes full of curiosity rather than fear. "My papa sent me," the girl announced. "Says if you're looking for work, the Fairfield ranch might be hiring. They're always needing extra hands, especially with the roundup coming." Penelope blinked in surprise. "Your father sent you to tell me this," the girl nodded. "Papa says people who judge others without knowing them aren't worth listening to. The Fairfield place is about 5 miles northwest of town. Big white ranch house, can't miss it." "What's your name?" Penelope asked softly, touched by this unexpected kindness. "Lily Henderson. Papa runs the smithy." The girl grinned, revealing a missing front tooth. "Are you really cursed?" "Lily." A man's voice called from downstairs, full of gentle reproach. "No," Penelope said, managing a small smile. "I'm just unlucky, I think. But thank you, Lily. Thank your father, too." The girl scampered off, and Penelope closed the door, leaning against it. One kind gesture in a town of cold shoulders. It was more than she'd gotten in some places. She decided she'd ride out to the Fairfield ranch at first light, before she could talk herself out of it, before the story of her supposed curse could reach them. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of fire and the sound of Tommy calling her name. She woke before dawn, splashed water on her face from the chipped basin, and braided her hair into a practical plait down her back. She wore her only good dress, a dark blue calico that had seen better days but was clean and mended with careful stitches. The ride northwest took her through rolling grassland dotted with juniper and piñon pine, the sun rising behind her and painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. The air smelled of sage and dust, and despite everything, Penelope felt something in her chest loosen slightly. The land here was beautiful in its harsh way, open and honest in a manner that people rarely were. The Fairfield ranch appeared on the horizon exactly as Lily had described, a sprawling white house surrounded by barns, corrals, and outbuildings. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see several figures moving about the property, beginning the day's work. Her stomach knotted with familiar anxiety as she approached, but she forced herself to ride on. A man emerged from one of the barns as she entered the main yard, tall and lean with shoulders broadened by hard work. He wore dusty work clothes and a hat that had seen many seasons, and when he looked up at her approach, Penelope found herself meeting the clearest blue eyes she'd ever seen. He had to be close to her own age, maybe a year or two older, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Help you, miss," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. Penelope dismounted, her legs slightly unsteady after the ride. "I'm looking for work. I heard the Fairfield ranch might be hiring." The man walked closer, and she noticed he moved with an easy confidence, his gaze direct but not unkind. "You heard right. We could use another set of hands in the house. Our cook's been asking for help with the harvest crews coming through. You have experience?" "Yes, sir. I can cook, clean, mend. I'm good with horses, too, if you need help in the stables." "Name's Fletcher Fairfield," he said, extending his hand. "My father owns the ranch, but he's been unwell. I've been running things the past 2 years." She shook his hand, his grip warm and calloused. "Penelope Parker." She watched his face carefully, waiting for recognition, for the change that always came. But Fletcher just nodded, his expression remaining open. "You just get into town, Miss Parker." "Yesterday evening." "Long journey." "Very long," she admitted. Fletcher studied her for a moment, and Penelope had the unsettling feeling he could see more than she wanted to reveal. But when he spoke, his tone was simply practical. "Let me introduce you to Rosa. She's been managing the house since my mother passed. If she thinks you'll work out, the job's yours. Pays $30 a month plus room and board." $30 was more than Penelope had dared hope for. She followed Fletcher toward the main house, very aware of his presence beside her, the way he shortened his stride to match hers. The house was even more impressive up close, 2 stories of whitewashed adobe with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Flower boxes beneath the windows overflowed with geraniums, bright spots of red against the white walls. Inside, the house was cool and surprisingly elegant, with heavy wooden furniture and woven rugs in rich colors. Fletcher led her through to the kitchen, where a woman in her 50s was rolling out dough with strong, practiced movements. She had silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a bun, and the kind of face that had seen both joy and sorrow but chose kindness anyway. "Rosa, this is Miss Penelope Parker. She's looking for work." Rosa wiped her hands on her apron and looked Penelope up and down with sharp but not unkind eyes. "You know your way around a kitchen, girl?" "Yes, madam, I can cook for large groups. My mother ran a boarding house before." She stopped, swallowing hard. "Before what?" Rosa asked gently. "Before she died, 3 years ago." Something in Rosa's expression softened. "You've been on your own since then," Penelope nodded, not trusting her voice. "Well, Lord knows I could use the help. Can you start today?" "Today." Hope, that dangerous feeling, began to flutter in Penelope's chest. "We've got 10 ranch hands plus Fletcher and his father to feed 3 times a day, more during roundup. If you're willing to work hard, I'm willing to give you a chance." Rosa's gaze was steady, measuring. "Fletcher runs a good outfit here. We don't tolerate laziness, but we don't tolerate cruelty either. You'll be treated fair if you work fair. That agreeable to you?" "More than agreeable, madam. Thank you." Fletcher smiled, and Penelope was struck by how it transformed his face, making him seem younger despite the responsibility he clearly carried. "I'll have one of the boys bring your things from town. Rosa will show you where you'll be staying. Welcome to the Fairfield Ranch, Miss Parker." As he left, Rosa watched Penelope with knowing eyes. "That boy's too kind for his own good sometimes, but his judgment of character is usually sound. You running from something, girl?" Penelope considered lying, but something about Rosa's direct gaze made her want to be honest. "Not running from something, running towards something, I hope. A fresh start." "Everyone's got a past," Rosa said. "What matters here is what you do in the present. Come on, I'll show you your room, then we'll start on dinner. The men come in hungry enough to eat a horse." The room Rosa showed her was small but clean, with a real bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the eastern pastures. It was more than Penelope had had in months, and she had to blink back tears as she set down her bag. "You all right?" Rosa asked from the doorway. "Just grateful," Penelope managed. "I've been traveling a long time." "Well, you're home now if you want to be. Get yourself settled, then come down and we'll start working on dinner. The men expect their meal at 6 sharp, and Fletcher gets right tetchy if it's late." Penelope changed into her work dress, a simple gray cotton, and tied an apron around her waist. When she returned to the kitchen, Rosa was already pulling vegetables from the cold box, a massive contraption that took up half of one wall. They fell into an easy rhythm, Rosa giving directions and Penelope following them competently. She peeled potatoes, chopped onions, and helped Rosa prepare an enormous pot roast with carrots and turnips. The work felt good, purposeful, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Penelope felt the tight knot in her chest begin to ease. "You weren't lying about knowing your way around a kitchen," Rosa observed as Penelope skillfully kneaded dough for biscuits. "Your mother taught you well. She was a wonderful cook. People came from all over to stay at our boarding house as much for her meals as for the rooms. You miss her." It wasn't a question, but Penelope answered anyway. "Every day. Her and my father and my brother, they all died in a fire." Rosa's hands stilled in their work. All three. I was visiting my aunt in Albuquerque when I came back." She stopped, the memory still too raw even after 3 years. "That's a heavy burden for anyone, especially a young woman on her own." "Some people think I caused it," Penelope said quietly, surprising herself with the admission. "They say I'm cursed, that I bring misfortune to everyone around me." Rosa made a dismissive sound. "Superstitious nonsense. People fear what they don't understand, and they understand tragedy least of all. You didn't set that fire, did you?" "No, madam." "Then you've got nothing to feel guilty about, and anyone who says otherwise can answer to me. Fletcher doesn't hold with foolish superstitions either. His mother's people were from Mexico, and she taught him that a person's character is shown by their actions, not by gossip or fear." Rosa's expression was fierce. "You're safe here, Penelope. I give you my word." The kindness was almost too much to bear. Penelope ducked her head, focusing intently on the biscuit dough. "Thank you, madam." At 6 o'clock precisely, the ranch hands began filing into the dining room, a long space adjacent to the kitchen with a table that could easily seat 15. They were a varied group, ranging in age from a young man who couldn't have been more than 18 to a grizzled older fellow with a limp and watchful eyes. They talked among themselves in easy camaraderie as they took their seats, falling silent when Fletcher entered with an older man leaning heavily on his arm. "That's Mr. Fairfield," Rosa whispered to Penelope as they carried in platters of food. "He had a stroke 6 months ago. Getting better slowly, but Fletcher's had to take on most of the running of the ranch." Mr. Fairfield was a large man, still powerfully built despite his illness, with gray hair and eyes the same clear blue as his son's. Fletcher helped him to a chair at the head of the table with such gentle care that Penelope felt something warm spread through her chest. The men noticed her, of course. She felt their curious gazes as she and Rosa served the meal, but Fletcher spoke up before anyone could comment. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Penelope Parker. She's going to be helping Rosa with the cooking and house management. I expect you all to treat her with the respect you'd show your own sisters." There was a chorus of "yes, sir," and polite nods in her direction. One of the younger hands, a freckled boy with red hair, even blushed when she set a platter near him. "Smells delicious, ladies," Fletcher said, and the sincerity in his voice made Penelope's cheeks warm. "I've been smelling that roast all afternoon." The meal was consumed with the enthusiasm of men who worked hard physical labor all day. Penelope noticed Fletcher helping his father cut his meat, his movements discreet and respectful, never drawing attention to the assistants. When Mr. Fairfield managed to speak a few halting words of thanks for the meal, Fletcher's face lit up with such genuine pleasure that Penelope found herself staring. "You keep looking at him like that, and the whole outfit will notice," Rosa murmured as they cleared dishes later. Penelope felt her cheeks flame. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you don't." Rosa's tone was amused rather than mocking. "He's a good man, Penelope, best I've known. But he's married to this ranch right now between his father's illness and keeping this place running. Doesn't leave much time for courting." "I wasn't thinking about courting," Penelope protested, even though her heart skipped at the word. "I just started working here." "Hum." Rosa handed her a stack of dirty plates. "Well, just so you know, half the unmarried women in Tucumcari have set their caps for him. He's always polite but never interested. Says he's too busy for romance." She paused, though I noticed he smiled more at dinner tonight than he has in weeks. Penelope tried not to think too much about that as she washed dishes, but she found her thoughts drifting to Fletcher anyway. The way he'd welcomed her without suspicion or fear. The gentleness he showed his father. The easy authority he had with his men that came from respect rather than intimidation. She was still thinking about him when she finally climbed into her bed that night, exhausted but satisfied in a way she hadn't been in years. Through her window, she could see stars scattered across the night sky like diamonds on black velvet, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the moon. For the first time since the fire, Penelope let herself imagine a future that might include more than just survival. It was a dangerous thing to hope, but in the quiet darkness of her new room, she allowed herself the luxury of possibility. The next weeks fell into a comfortable pattern. Penelope rose before dawn to help Rosa prepare breakfast, worked through the day cooking, cleaning, and managing the endless tasks required to keep a working ranch house running smoothly. The work was hard but satisfying, and she fell into bed each night too tired to dream. The ranch hands accepted her presence with easy friendliness once they saw she wasn't afraid of hard work. Even the grizzled older fellow, whose name was Tom, warmed to her after she mended a tear in his favorite shirt with stitches so neat they were nearly invisible. But it was Fletcher whose presence she was most aware of. He was everywhere on the ranch, up before dawn checking on the cattle, working alongside his men to mend fences, breaking horses in the corral with patient skill. He seemed to have an endless capacity for work, but Penelope noticed the weariness around his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried. They spoke in passing throughout the days, brief exchanges that were always polite, sometimes laced with gentle humor. Fletcher had an easy way of talking that put people at ease, but Penelope sensed there was more beneath the surface, depths he kept carefully hidden. 2 weeks after her arrival, she was hanging laundry in the yard when one of the horses in the nearest corral began screaming. She dropped the sheet she'd been pinning and ran toward the sound, her heart pounding. A young stallion was rearing and bucking, his front leg tangled in the fence wire. Blood streaked his dark coat, and his eyes showed white with panic. Fletcher was already there, speaking in low, soothing tones as he approached the terrified animal. "Easy now, easy. Let me help you, boy." Penelope slipped through the fence without thinking, her years around her father's horses overriding caution. "Keep talking to him," she said quietly. "I'll work on the wire." Fletcher's eyes met hers for a brief moment, a flash of concern and something else she couldn't name, but he didn't tell her to leave. Instead, he kept up his steady stream of calming words while Penelope knelt by the horse's tangled leg. The wire had wrapped around the fetlock, cutting into the skin with each movement. Penelope worked carefully, her fingers gentle but quick, speaking her own soft words to the trembling animal. Blood soaked into her dress, but she barely noticed. "Almost there," she murmured. "Just a little more, brave boy, just a little more." With a final twist, the wire came free. The horse lunged away, and Fletcher caught Penelope's arm, pulling her back before the animal's hooves could catch her. They stumbled backward together, landing in an ungraceful heap in the dust, Fletcher's arm still around her. For a moment, they stayed like that, breathing hard, and Penelope was intensely aware of every point where their bodies touched. Then Fletcher helped her to her feet, his hands steadying but releasing her quickly. "That was brave," he said, his voice rough. "Foolish, maybe, but brave." "My father raised horses," Penelope said, brushing dust from her ruined dress. "I know they don't mean to hurt you when they're scared. They just need someone to stay calm and help them." Fletcher looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "The horse isn't the only one, I think." Before she could respond, Tom came running up with a medical kit. Together, she and Fletcher cleaned and bandaged the horse's leg, their movements coordinated without needing to speak. The stallion calmed under their combined care, and by the time they were finished, he was nuzzling Fletcher's shoulder in apology. "You're good with them," Fletcher said as they walked back toward the house. "The horses trust you. Animals don't care about gossip or curses," Penelope said without thinking, then bit her lip, wishing she could take the words back. Fletcher stopped walking. "What gossip?" Penelope hesitated, then decided she owed him the truth. He'd given her a job and a safe place. The least she could do was be honest. "People say I'm cursed, that I bring misfortune to those around me. My family died in a fire 3 years ago, and somehow that became my fault in people's eyes. Every town I've been to since, the story follows me. And you thought I should know this because you have a right to know what people say before it causes problems for you and your ranch." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. Then he said, "My mother died of consumption when I was 17. People said all kinds of things then too. that it was God's punishment for marrying a Mexican woman, that she'd brought disease to our town, that my father should have known better than to marry outside his own kind. His voice was tight with old anger. People say a lot of things, Miss Parker. Most of it's born from fear and ignorance. I learned young not to put much stock in gossip. I'm sorry about your mother, Penelope said softly, and I'm sorry about your family. But I judge people by what I see them do, not by what others say about them. What I've seen is a woman who works hard, who's kind to my father, who just risked getting kicked in the head to help save a horse. He met her eyes directly. That's all I need to know. Something shifted between them in that moment. Something subtle but significant. Penelope felt it like a change in the wind, like the first hint of rain after a long drought. "Thank you," she managed. Fletcher nodded. Then his eyes dropped to her dress, still stained with blood and dust. "You better go change before Rosa sees you. She'll lecture us both about taking proper care." Penelope laughed, surprised by the sound. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. "You're probably right." As she walked back to the house, she could feel Fletcher's gaze on her back, warm as sunshine. And when she glanced over her shoulder, he was still standing there, watching her with that same unreadable expression on his face. Rosa took one look at her and shook her head. "I don't want to know. The young stallion got tangled in the wire. We got him free." "We?" Rosa's eyebrows rose. "You and Fletcher." "It wasn't anything," Penelope said, but she could feel her cheeks warming. "Uh-huh. Well, go change before you track blood through my clean floors. And Penelope, Fletcher doesn't let just anyone help with his horses. He's particular about who he trusts with them." That night, Penelope lay in bed replaying the moment when Fletcher had pulled her to safety, the way his arms had felt around her, solid and sure. She thought about what he'd said about his mother, about judgment and gossip, about trusting what he could see rather than what he heard. She was falling for him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey. It felt like the first warm day after winter. It felt like hope. The following Sunday, Fletcher announced at breakfast that he was taking his father into town for the doctor's weekly visit. "Would you like to come along, Miss Parker?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes hopeful. "You haven't had a day off since you started. Rosa can manage dinner on her own for once." Rosa made a shooing motion. "Go on, girl. You've earned a break. Besides, I want to try out a new recipe without you watching my every move." Penelope hesitated. Tucumcari meant facing the whispers again, the pointed stares and turned backs. But Fletcher was watching her with such open invitation that she found herself nodding. "If you're sure I won't be in the way." "I'm sure." They set out mid-morning in the ranch wagon. Mr. Fairfield bundled comfortably in the back on a padded seat Fletcher had rigged for his comfort. The older man's speech had improved slightly in the weeks Penelope had been at the ranch, and he managed to thank her for her care with halting words that made her eyes sting with unexpected emotion. "You're welcome, Mr. Fairfield. You're getting stronger every day." Fletcher glanced at her, smiling. "He likes you. He's not always so talkative with people he doesn't trust." The ride into town took nearly an hour, and Fletcher kept up an easy conversation about the ranch, the cattle, his plans for expanding the operation once his father was fully recovered. He spoke about his mother too, about how she taught him to gentle horses with patience instead of force, about her flower garden that he still tended in her memory. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Penelope said. She was. Strong, smart, never backed down from anyone. Fletcher's voice was warm with memory. "She and my father met when he was down in Socorro buying cattle. He said he knew within a day he was going to marry her. Took him 6 months to convince her, but she finally said yes. 6 months. She must have been particular." "She was." Fletcher grinned. Said she wasn't going to marry just anyone. Said a man had to prove he could match her, not just try to own her. My father always said it was the best 6 months of his life, trying to win her over. They arrived in Tucumcari just before noon, and Fletcher drove straight to the doctor's office. He helped his father down with careful hands, and the doctor, a kind-faced older gentleman, greeted them warmly. "Miss Parker, you're welcome to wait here or walk around town while we're with the doctor," Fletcher said. "Might be an hour or so," Penelope nodded, steeling herself. "I think I'll visit the general store. There are a few things I'd like to pick up." She walked down the main street with her head high, very aware of the whispers that started as soon as people recognized her. A group of women outside the church fell silent as she passed, their expressions ranging from pity to suspicion. Two men in front of the saloon stopped their conversation to stare. The general store was run by a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had made her disapproval of Penelope clear during her brief stay at the hotel. But Penelope needed thread and buttons, and this was the only store in town. "Miss Parker." Mrs. Patterson's greeting was cold. "I'm surprised you're still in the area." "I found work at the Fairfield ranch," Penelope said evenly, setting her items on the counter. The woman's eyebrows shot up. "Does Fletcher know about your history?" "He knows everything he needs to know." "Does he know about the Miller Ranch?" Penelope's blood ran cold. "What about the Miller Ranch?" "You don't know?" Mrs. Patterson looked almost pleased. "The Miller place burned down last week, lost their barn and nearly lost the house. They're saying it's because you're in the area that your curse has reached Tucumcari." "That's ridiculous," Penelope said, but her hands were shaking. "I've been at the Fairfield ranch for weeks. I haven't been anywhere near the Miller place." "Fire doesn't care about distance when it comes to curses," the woman said darkly. "You should move on before something happens to the Fairfields. That family has had enough tragedy without you bringing them more." Penelope paid for her items with trembling hands and fled the store, her vision blurring with tears. She made it to the alley beside the building before she had to lean against the wall, fighting for breath. Not again. Not here, not when she'd finally found somewhere that felt safe. "Penelope." She looked up to find Fletcher standing at the mouth of the alley, concern etched across his face. "What happened?" "I'm fine," she said, but her voice broke on the words. "You're crying." He moved closer, his presence solid and reassuring. "What did someone say to you?" "It doesn't matter." "It does to me." The gentleness in his voice nearly undid her. Penelope wiped at her eyes impatiently. "Mrs. Patterson told me about the Miller ranch burning. She said it's my fault, that my curse caused it. She said I should leave before I bring the same misfortune to your family." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "The Miller fire was caused by a lightning strike during that storm last week." The marshal confirmed it. "Mrs. Patterson is a bitter woman who gets her pleasure from hurting others." "But what if she's right?" Penelope looked up at him, all her fear and grief spilling out. "What if I am cursed? What if something happens to you or your father or Rosa because I'm there?" "Look at me." Fletcher's hands came up to frame her face, his touch warm and steady. "You are not cursed. You are not responsible for lightning strikes or accidents or the cruel randomness of the world. You're a woman who survived terrible loss and kept going despite people trying to tear you down. That's not a curse, that's strength." "You don't know that," she whispered. "You can't know for sure. I know you've been at the ranch for nearly a month now and you know what's happened. My father's gotten better. Rosa's got help for the first time in years. The men are eating better than they have since my mother died, and I—" He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. "I smile more. I look forward to meals because I know you'll be there. I find excuses to come back to the house during the day just to see you." Penelope's breath caught. "Fletcher." "You haven't brought misfortune, Penelope. You've brought happiness. You've brought light to a house that's been dark too long, so I don't care what Mrs. Patterson or anyone else in this town says. You're not cursed and you're not leaving. What if you're wrong? She asked, even as hope bloomed fierce and bright in her chest. Then I'm wrong. But I'd rather take that risk than lose you. His thumb brushed away a tear from her cheek. I'm falling in love with you, Penelope Parker. I've been falling since the day you rode up to the ranch looking like you were ready to face down the whole world despite being terrified. I've been falling every time you laugh with Rosa, every time you help my father, every time you show kindness to the men even when you're exhausted. And I don't believe for 1 second that loving you is going to bring me anything but joy. You can't mean that, she breathed, even though everything in her wanted to believe him. I've never meant anything more. His eyes were steady on hers, clear and certain. I know it's soon. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But I also know what I feel, and I know what I see when I look at you. I see home. I see future. I see happiness. Penelope closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. When she opened them again, Fletcher was still there, still watching her with that same open, honest expression. I'm falling for you too, she admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating. I've been trying not to. I've been trying to protect you from what people say about me, but I can't seem to help it. Fletcher smiled, that transforming smile that made her heart skip. Then stop trying. Let yourself be happy, Penelope. Let yourself believe that good things can happen to you. What about the town? What about people like Mrs. Patterson? Let me worry about that. He lowered his hands from her face but caught one of hers, lacing their fingers together. You just worry about whether you can put up with a stubborn rancher who's going to court you properly despite any gossip. Court me. She felt a smile tugging at her own lips. If you'll let me, I'll do it right. Flowers, Sunday dinners, long walks, everything my father did to win my mother. His eyes were warm. Though hopefully it won't take me 6 months to convince you. I don't think it will take anywhere near that long, Penelope said softly. Fletcher squeezed her hand, then, mindful of the public street, stepped back. Come on. My father's probably finished with the doctor by now. But Penelope, this conversation isn't over. Promise. Promise. They walked back to the doctor's office hand in hand, and if people stared, Penelope found she didn't care. Fletcher's confidence was contagious, his certainty a shield against the whispers. For the first time in 3 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved happiness. Mr. Fairfield noticed the change between them immediately. His smile was lopsided but genuine, and he patted Penelope's hand with his good one when they helped him back into the wagon. The old man's eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. On the ride back to the ranch, Fletcher told stories about growing up, about learning to ride before he could walk, about his mother teaching him Spanish and his father teaching him the ranch business. Penelope found herself laughing, really laughing at his tales of childhood mishaps and youthful adventures. You were a troublemaker, she accused. I was curious, he corrected with a grin. There's a difference. Is that what you're calling it? Rosa took one look at them when they arrived back at the ranch and smiled knowingly. About time, she muttered, just loud enough for Penelope to hear. That evening, after the dinner dishes were washed and put away, Fletcher found Penelope in the garden where she'd gone to watch the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, the air finally cooling after the heat of the day. May I join you? He asked. Please. She patted the bench beside her and he sat, their shoulders nearly touching. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors shift and change. Then Fletcher said, I meant what I said in town, about courting you properly, about how I feel. I know. Penelope turned to look at him. I meant what I said too. I want you to know something else. His expression was serious now. "If people in town give you trouble, if anyone says anything to hurt you, I want you to tell me. You're not alone anymore, Penelope. You have me and Rosa and my father. You have people who care about you." The tears came again, but these were different, cleaner. "I'm not used to that, having people." "Get used to it." Fletcher reached over and took her hand again. "Because I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to let you run either." "I don't want to run," she admitted. "For the first time in 3 years, I want to stay." "Then stay. Build a life here. Let me build one with you." Penelope leaned her head against his shoulder, and Fletcher's arm came around her, pulling her close. They sat like that, as the sun finished setting and the first stars began to appear, and Penelope felt something inside her that had been tightly closed begin to open. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Penelope had ever known. Fletcher courted her with a patience and dedication that made her heart swell. He brought her wildflowers from the pastures, took her on rides around the ranch property, sat with her in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. True to his word, he did it all properly, always respectful, always mindful of propriety. But there were moments, brief touches, long looks that spoke of deeper feelings building between them. The ranch hands noticed, of course, but their teasing was good-natured. Tom even pulled Penelope aside one day to tell her he was glad Fletcher had finally found someone. "Boy works too hard," the old cowhand said. "Needs someone to remind him there's more to life than cattle and fences. You're good for him, Miss Parker. Anyone with eyes can see it." Even Mr. Fairfield's health continued to improve. His speech became clearer, his mobility better. The doctor declared himself amazed at the progress, and Rosa whispered to Penelope that it was because the old man finally had something to look forward to, seeing his son happy and settled. But happiness, Penelope had learned, was always fragile. It came on a Wednesday 6 weeks after she'd started at the ranch. She and Rosa were in the kitchen preparing bread when one of the hands, a young man named Billy, came running in, his face pale with fear. "Miss Rosa, it's the barn." "The barn's on fire." Penelope's blood turned to ice. Through the window, she could see smoke rising from one of the smaller barns, flames already licking at the wooden walls. Men were running with buckets, shouting to each other, but the fire was spreading fast in the dry autumn air. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She ran outside without thinking, her only thought to help to stop this before it got worse. But as she reached the barn, hands grabbed her, pulling her back. "Stay back, miss," one of the hands yelled. "It's too dangerous." Fletcher was in the thick of it, organizing bucket brigades, shouting orders, his face streaked with soot. When he saw Penelope, relief and fear crossed his face in equal measure. It took an hour to get the fire under control, and by then the barn was a total loss. The horses had been saved, led to safety by Tom and the other hands, but the building itself was destroyed. Men stood around in exhausted silence, staring at the smoking ruins. Penelope stood apart from the others, her whole body shaking. The whispers had already started. She could hear them even over the crackle of dying flames, just like the Miller place. "I told you she was cursed. Never should have let her stay." Fletcher was walking toward her, his face grim but determined, when Mrs. Patterson's voice rang out across the yard. The woman had ridden out from town, drawn by the smoke visible for miles. "This is her doing." Mrs. Patterson pointed at Penelope with a shaking finger. "The cursed girl brought this on you, Fletcher Fairfield, just like she brought ruin to her own family. Just like she brought fire to the Miller Ranch. You need to send her away before she destroys everything you have. That's enough." Fletcher's voice cracked like a whip, but Mrs. Patterson wasn't finished. "Her family burned because of her. Everyone she touches comes to ruin. If you keep her here, you'll lose everything just like her father did." I said that's enough. Fletcher's voice rose to a shout and everyone fell silent. You come onto my property to spread lies and fear, to attack someone under my protection. I'm trying to help you, Mrs. Patterson insisted. Before it's too late. Help, Fletcher's laugh was bitter. You want to know what caused this fire? Lightning struck during that storm this afternoon, same as the Miller barn, same as probably half a dozen other fires this dry season. Not a curse, not supernatural vengeance. Just plain, unfortunate nature. But nothing. You want to talk about curses? The only curse I see is how quick people are to blame an innocent woman for things beyond her control. How eager you are to make someone else's tragedy about your own fear and superstition. Fletcher moved to stand beside Penelope, his hand finding hers. Miss Parker has brought nothing but good to this ranch and to my family, and she's staying, whether you or anyone else likes it. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed with anger. You're making a mistake, Fletcher. Mark my words, you'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not saying this sooner. Fletcher's voice gentled, but his words carried to everyone in the yard. I love her. I'm going to marry her if she'll have me, and anyone who has a problem with that can leave my property and never come back. Penelope gasped, turning to stare at him. Fletcher, what are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago. He turned to face her fully, ignoring their audience. I know this isn't romantic. I know it's not the proposal you deserve. But I can't stand here and let people blame you for one more thing that isn't your fault. I can't watch you doubt yourself and wonder if you're cursed when I know, with everything I am, that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. You don't have to do this, she said, tears streaming down her face. You don't have to protect me like this. I'm not protecting you, I'm telling the truth. His eyes were blazing with emotion. I love you, Penelope Parker. I want to marry you, build a life with you, have children with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're beside me. I want to grow old with you on this ranch, watching the years pass and our family grow. He squeezed her hands. So what do you say? Will you marry me? Penelope looked around at the assembled crowd. Mrs. Patterson looked scandalized. The ranch hands were grinning. Rosa was wiping tears from her eyes, and through the window of the house, she could see Mr. Fairfield watching with a broad smile on his face. She looked back at Fletcher, at this man who had defended her when others condemned her, who had seen her worth when others saw only bad luck, who had chosen to love her despite every reason not to. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, I'll marry you. Fletcher let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite the soot and smoke and ruined barn. When he set her down, he kissed her, right there in front of everyone, a kiss that tasted of ash and tears and promise. The ranch hands cheered. Rosa laughed and cried at the same time. Even Tom was grinning ear to ear. Mrs. Patterson mounted her horse and rode away in a huff, but Penelope found she didn't care. Let the woman talk. Let the whole town talk. She had Fletcher and he had her, and that was enough. That night, after the excitement had died down and the hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Penelope sat with Fletcher on the porch of the main house. His father had already retired, beaming and offering congratulations in his halting speech. You didn't have to propose like that, Penelope said softly, in front of everyone, making a statement. I know, but I wanted to. I wanted everyone to know exactly how I feel about you. No doubts, no whispers, no room for anyone to question whether I'm sure. Fletcher took her hand. I am sure, Penelope. I've been sure for weeks. I was just waiting for the right moment to ask. Mrs. Patterson forced my hand, but I don't regret it. Even though the barn burned down the same day you proposed, some might say that's not a good omen. Some might say you saved all the horses by being quick-thinking enough to help Tom open the corral gates. Some might say we were lucky the fire didn't spread to the other buildings. Some might say it's just proof that bad things can happen to anyone, cursed or not. He pulled her closer. I say I'm the luckiest man in New Mexico because you said yes. Penelope laughed despite herself. When did you get so good with words? My mother used to read poetry. Some of it stuck, I guess. He was quiet for a moment. She would have liked you. She would have said you were strong enough to be a rancher's wife, to handle whatever life throws at you. I hope I can be that strong. You already are. You've been that strong all along. You just needed someone to see it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called and another answered. The night air smelled of sage and smoke and possibility. When should we get married? Penelope asked. As soon as possible, Fletcher said immediately, making her laugh. What? I'm serious. I don't want to wait. Life's too short, and I've already wasted too much time being cautious and responsible and putting the ranch before everything else. A month, Penelope suggested. That gives me time to make a dress, gives Rosa time to plan, gives your father time to get even stronger so he can walk you down the aisle. Walk me down the aisle. It's your wedding too, she teased. Why should I be the only one walking? Fletcher grinned. Fair enough. 1 month. But if you try to stretch it to 2, I'm going to start complaining loudly and often. I'll keep that in mind. He kissed her again, slower this time, tender and full of promise. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. I love you, he murmured. I love you too, Penelope whispered back, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Rosa threw herself into planning with enthusiasm, declaring that if Fletcher was finally getting married, they were going to do it right. The ranch hands pitched in to help rebuild the barn, working with renewed energy now that there was a wedding to look forward to. Word spread through Tucumcari, of course. Some people were scandalized. Others were cautiously supportive. But Fletcher had made his position clear, and few dared to voice their objections where he might hear them. Penelope made her wedding dress with Rosa's help, using fabric they'd ordered from Santa Fe, a beautiful cream-colored silk that felt like water between her fingers. She embroidered tiny flowers along the hem and cuffs, spending her evenings by lamplight with needle and thread, each stitch a meditation on how far she'd come. Fletcher's father continued to improve, motivated by the upcoming wedding. He worked with Fletcher every day on his walking, determined to be able to escort his son without assistance. The old man's stubbornness reminded Penelope of Fletcher, and she could see where his son had learned his determination. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lily Henderson and her father came to visit, bringing a beautiful carved wooden box as a gift. Papa made it, Lily announced proudly, for you to keep your special things in. Penelope knelt down to the girl's level, touched beyond words. It's beautiful, Lily. Thank you both. Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith who had sent his daughter to help Penelope all those weeks ago, smiled. My wife and I wanted you to know that not everyone in town believes the foolish talk. There are plenty of us who are happy for you and Fletcher. Good people finding each other is worth celebrating, no matter what some might say. That means more than you know, Penelope said, standing to shake his hand. Your kindness when I first arrived, it made all the difference. You just looked like someone who needed a friend, Mr. Henderson said simply. We all need those sometimes. After they left, Penelope showed the box to Fletcher, who examined the craftsmanship with an appreciative eye. Henderson does good work, and he's right, you know. You do have friends here, more than you might realize. People see how you've helped my father, how you work hard, how you make me happy. That counts for a lot in a small town. Even if some still think I'm cursed, even then, there will always be people who believe what they want to believe. But there are also people who judge others by their actions, not by superstition. He set the box aside and pulled her into his arms. 2 more weeks and you'll be my wife, Mrs. Penelope Fairfield. How does that sound? Like a dream I'm afraid to wake up from, she admitted. Then don't wake up. Stay right here with me in this dream that's actually real. He kissed her forehead. I promise you, Penelope, I'm going to spend every day making sure you know how loved you are, how valued, how cherished. I'm going to chase away every doubt and every fear until all that's left is happiness. That's a big promise. I'm good for it. His eyes were serious despite his light tone. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The wedding was held on a bright Sunday morning in late October, when the air had finally cooled and the sky was the deep, endless blue that only came with autumn. They decided to hold the ceremony at the ranch rather than the church, a decision that raised some eyebrows but felt right to both of them. Rosa had transformed the front yard into something magical, with chairs borrowed from every ranch within 20 miles, white ribbons tied to fence posts, and wildflowers in every vase and jar she could find. The new barn stood proud in the background, rebuilt with help from neighbors and friends, a testament to community and perseverance. Penelope dressed in her room with Rosa's help, the older woman fussing over every detail with tears in her eyes. You look beautiful, Mija, Rosa said, using the Spanish endearment for the first time. Like an angel. Penelope turned to look in the small mirror they'd hung on the wall. The cream silk dress fit her perfectly, the embroidered flowers catching the light. She'd left her dark hair down at Fletcher's request, held back from her face with combs Rosa had lent her. I'm so nervous, she admitted. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll handle it just like we've handled everything else. Rosa took her hands. But nothing is going to go wrong, Penelope. This is your day, yours and Fletcher's. Just focus on that. Focus on the man waiting for you out there, the man who loves you more than anything. Outside, chairs were filled with ranch hands, neighbors, and even a few townspeople, including Mr. Henderson and his family. Lily waved enthusiastically from the front row when she saw Penelope appear in the doorway. But Penelope only had eyes for Fletcher, standing at the makeshift altar with the minister, his father beside him using a cane but standing proud and straight. Fletcher wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed, and when he saw her, his face transformed with such joy that Penelope felt her own fears melt away. She walked toward him slowly, savoring every moment, every step that brought her closer to her future. When she reached him, Fletcher took her hand and she could feel him trembling slightly. You're beautiful, he whispered just for her. You're not so bad yourself, she whispered back, making him grin. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about two people choosing each other despite the challenges life might bring. When it came time for the vows, Fletcher's voice was strong and clear. I, Fletcher Fairfield, take you, Penelope Parker, to be my wife. I promise to love you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, through whatever may come. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your shelter in the storm. I promise to see you always for who you truly are, not who others say you should be. I promise to make you laugh, to hold you when you cry, to build a life with you that's full of joy and love and purpose. From this day forward, you'll never be alone again. Penelope's voice shook but held as she repeated her own vows. I, Penelope Parker, take you, Fletcher Fairfield, to be my husband. I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to stand by your side, to support your dreams, to help you carry your burdens. I promise to see the good in each day, to build a home filled with laughter and warmth, to be brave enough to accept the happiness you offer me. From this day forward, You are my family, my home, my heart." The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Fletcher kissed her to enthusiastic applause and whistles from the ranch hands. When they parted, both were grinning like fools, and Fletcher's father was openly weeping with joy. The celebration that followed was boisterous and warm. Rosa had prepared a feast, and someone had brought a fiddle, filling the air with music. Penelope danced first with Fletcher, then with his father, who managed remarkably well despite his cane, then with Tom and several of the other hands who wanted to congratulate her properly. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Fletcher pulled her away from the crowd to a quiet spot behind the house. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Penelope said honestly, leaning back against him. "Thank you for this, for all of it, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for defending me when others condemned me, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable. You were never unlovable. You were just waiting for the right person to see you." Fletcher kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad I was that person. I'm glad you chose me back." "Always," Penelope promised. "I'll always choose you." They stood like that as the party continued without them, watching the sunset paint the world in beauty. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over fear, hope over despair. And if anyone still whispered that Penelope Parker was cursed, if anyone still claimed she brought misfortune, Fletcher Fairfield would have told them they were wrong. She had brought him only happiness, only light, only love, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure she knew it. The first months of their marriage settled into a comfortable rhythm. Penelope moved her things into Fletcher's room, a large, comfortable space on the second floor with windows overlooking the eastern pastures. She woke each morning to find him already gone, starting his day before dawn, but he always left little signs of his presence. Wildflowers in a jar, a note written in his careful hand, once even a drawing of her asleep that made her laugh and blush in equal measure. Winter came to New Mexico, bringing cold nights and occasional snow that dusted the landscape in white. The ranch work slowed somewhat, giving Fletcher more time in the house, more evenings spent by the fire with Penelope curled against his side while Rosa knitted and Mr. Fairfield practiced his speech by reading aloud from books. Penelope discovered she loved being part of a family again. She loved the easy banter with Rosa, the affectionate teasing from the ranch hands, the way Mr. Fairfield's eyes lit up when she brought him his coffee in the morning. And she loved, most of all, the quiet moments with Fletcher, learning the patterns of his moods, the way he thought, the dreams he held for their future. "I want children," he told her one evening as they lay in bed, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. "Lots of them. I want this house filled with noise and laughter and little feet running everywhere." "How many is lots?" Penelope asked, amused. "I don't know, 4, 5, however many we're blessed with." He paused. "Is that all right with you?" "It's more than all right. I want that too. I want to give them everything my parents gave me, all the love and security and joy. I want them to grow up knowing they're cherished. They will be. Any child of ours will be the most loved child in all of New Mexico." Fletcher's voice was full of certainty. "Though I hope they get your eyes and my mother's courage. And your kindness," Penelope added. "Your father's stubbornness, too. That seems like it might be useful." Fletcher laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Fair enough. Though if they get my mother's stubbornness and my father's, we're going to have our hands full." "I look forward to it," Penelope said, and meant it. Spring came early, bringing warmth and new life to the ranch. The cattle had calved successfully, the winter losses minimal thanks to Fletcher's careful management. The ranch was prospering, and with prosperity came expansion. Fletcher hired 2 more hands and bought additional land to the south, full of plans and enthusiasm. Mr. Fairfield continued to improve, his speech now almost back to normal, his mobility much better. He began taking short rides around the property, always accompanied but increasingly independent. The joy of seeing his son happily married seemed to have given him new purpose, new determination to recover fully. In early April, Penelope realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week, not wanting to get her hopes up, but when the signs became unmistakable, she could barely contain her excitement. She told Rosa first, needing to share the news with another woman, and Rosa wept and hugged her and immediately began planning. That evening, she waited until after dinner, until the hands had left and Mr. Fairfield had retired, until it was just her and Fletcher in their room. He was pulling off his boots, talking about the new foal one of the mares had delivered that afternoon, when Penelope said, "I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made him look up sharply. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I'm perfect. Better than perfect." She took his hands, pulling him to his feet. "I'm pregnant, Fletcher. We're going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then his face broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen, and he let out a whoop of pure joy that probably woke everyone in the house. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her down as if she might break. "Are you sure? How long? When? Are you feeling well? Do you need to sit down? Should you be working?" The questions tumbled out in a rush. Penelope laughed, cupping his face in her hands. "I'm sure. About 2 months along, I think. The baby should come in November. I feel wonderful. And yes, I can still work at least for several more months." "A baby," Fletcher breathed, his hands coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Penelope, I've never been happier in my entire life. Even happier than our wedding day, even happier. Though I didn't think that was possible." He kissed her softly. "I love you so much, both of you." They told Mr. Fairfield the next morning, and the old man cried openly, pulling Penelope into a fierce hug and managing to say, "Grandmother would be so proud, so happy." The ranch hands congratulated them with genuine enthusiasm, Tom declaring that it was about time the ranch had young ones running around again. Even some of the townspeople, when word inevitably spread, offered warm wishes, but there were still whispers, of course. Penelope heard them when she went into town for supplies, saw the worried looks some people exchanged. What if the curse affected the baby? What if she brought misfortune to her own child like she had to her family? Fletcher noticed her growing quiet, the way she sometimes placed a protective hand on her belly when she thought no one was looking. One evening, he found her in the nursery they'd started preparing, staring out the window with tears on her cheeks. "Talk to me," he said gently, coming to stand beside her. "What if they're right?" The words burst out of her. "What if something happens to the baby because of me? What if I really am cursed and I'm passing it on to our child?" Fletcher turned her to face him, his hands firm on her shoulders. "Listen to me, Penelope Fairfield. You are not cursed. Our baby is not cursed. The only thing our child is going to inherit from you is your strength, your kindness, your beautiful eyes, and your stubborn determination to see the good in people even when they don't deserve it. But what if something goes wrong? Then it will be because sometimes things go wrong, not because of some supernatural curse that doesn't exist." His voice was fierce. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. Sometimes there are complications that have nothing to do with curses or bad luck, or anything except the simple fact that life is unpredictable. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure you and the baby are healthy and safe. You really believe that there's nothing wrong with me?" "I know there's nothing wrong with you." He pulled her close, one hand cradling her head, the other resting on her stomach. "You know what I think? I think you're one of the bravest, strongest people I've ever met. I think you survived terrible loss and kept going when it would have been easier to give up. I think you're going to be an amazing mother, and I think our child is the luckiest baby in the world to have you." Penelope let herself cry against his chest, releasing all the fear and worry she'd been holding. And Fletcher held her, steady and sure, until the storm passed. The pregnancy progressed normally, much to everyone's relief. Penelope bloomed with it, her skin glowing, her eyes bright. Fletcher was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly asking if she needed anything, if she was comfortable, if she should be resting. "If you ask me one more time if I need to sit down, I'm going to dump this bowl of beans over your head," Penelope threatened one afternoon in the kitchen, making Rosa laugh. "Leave the poor man alone," Rosa said. "He's just excited and worried. First babies are always worrying for fathers." "I'm not made of glass," Penelope protested, but she was smiling. The truth was, she loved Fletcher's attentiveness, even when it bordered on excessive. It made her feel cherished, protected, valued. Summer came hot and dry, and Penelope spent more time indoors, helping Rosa with preserving and canning, sewing baby clothes with tiny, careful stitches. Fletcher's father often sat with them, reading or working on his own projects, content to be part of the domestic scene. In late August, a letter arrived from Penelope's aunt in Albuquerque, the one she'd been visiting when the fire happened. They'd corresponded sporadically over the years, but Penelope had been afraid to share her happiness, afraid her aunt might believe the curse rumors too. But the letter was warm and loving, congratulating her on her marriage and the coming baby, begging her to visit when the child was old enough to travel. Her aunt wrote that she'd never believed the foolish talk about curses, that she'd always known Penelope was blameless, that she regretted not being more supportive in the years since the fire. Penelope cried over that letter, and Fletcher held her while she did, understanding without needing to ask that these were good tears, healing tears. As her due date approached, Fletcher became almost comically nervous. He checked on her constantly, jumped at every sound, and drove Rosa to distraction with his hovering. "He's going to wear himself out before the baby even arrives," Rosa confided to Penelope. "I've never seen him like this." "He's scared," Penelope said softly. "His mother died, his father almost died. He's terrified of losing me." "Have you told him that you're not going anywhere every day, sometimes twice a day?" Penelope smiled despite the seriousness of the conversation. "He's getting better, slowly." The pain started on a cold November evening, 3 days before Penelope's calculated due date. She was helping Rosa with dinner when the first contraction hit, strong enough to make her gasp and grip the edge of the table. Rosa took one look at her face and started issuing orders. "Tom, ride for the doctor. Billy, heat water. Someone find Fletcher. Now." Fletcher came running, his face white with fear. "Is it time? Are you all right? What do you need?" "I need you to breathe," Penelope said, managing to smile despite another contraction. "And maybe help me upstairs." The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Fletcher stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement and love. The doctor arrived and proclaimed everything progressing normally, which did little to ease Fletcher's obvious terror. Rosa bustled in and out, bringing supplies, offering comfort, telling Penelope she was doing wonderfully. Mr. Fairfield waited downstairs, pacing despite his cane, while the ranch hands gathered in anxious clusters outside. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Penelope gave one final push, and the sound of a baby's cry filled the room. The doctor held up a squalling, red-faced infant. "It's a boy," he announced with a smile. "A healthy baby boy." Fletcher let out a sound between a laugh and a sob, and Penelope felt tears streaming down her own face as the doctor placed the baby in her arms. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in protest at being thrust into the cold world. "Hello, little one," Penelope whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Fletcher touched the baby's head with one trembling finger, his expression full of wonder. "He's so small, so perfect. Look at him, Penelope. We made him." "We did." She looked up at her husband, seeing the love and awe in his face. "What should we name him?" They'd discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking at his son, Fletcher said, "Thomas. Thomas Fletcher Fairfield, after Tom, who's been like a second father to me and after my father, if that's all right with you." "Thomas," Penelope repeated, testing the name. The baby seemed to quiet at the sound. "It's perfect, Tommy." The doctor finished his work and declared both mother and baby healthy, much to everyone's relief. Rosa came in to coo over the infant, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Fairfield was allowed up shortly after, and the old man wept openly at the sight of his grandson. "He's beautiful," Mr. Fairfield managed. "Just beautiful. Your mother would have loved him so much." "She would have," Fletcher agreed, his own voice thick with emotion. "And she would have loved Penelope for giving him to us." The ranch hands took turns peeking in throughout the day, offering awkward congratulations and gifts they'd made or bought. Tom brought a small wooden horse he'd carved, his weathered face creasing in a proud smile. Billy presented a tiny pair of boots he'd commissioned from the town cobbler. Each gift was accepted with gratitude and placed carefully in the nursery. That night, when it was just the three of them, Fletcher sat on the edge of the bed, holding his son while Penelope rested against the pillows. The baby slept peacefully, his tiny face serene. "You see now," Fletcher said softly. "No curse, no misfortune, just blessing, just happiness, just love." "I see," Penelope whispered, watching her husband with their child, feeling the weight of joy so profound it almost hurt. "I see everything." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Penelope learned to navigate motherhood with Rosa's patient guidance and Fletcher's devoted help. He was a natural father, patient with the baby's cries, gentle in handling such a tiny creature, willing to walk the floors at night when Tommy was fussy. The ranch hands doted on the baby shamelessly. Tom could often be found in the nursery, rocking the baby and singing old songs in a surprisingly pleasant baritone. Even the gruffest of the cowboys would soften when Tommy grabbed their fingers with his tiny fist. Word of the baby's safe arrival spread through Tucumcari, and something shifted in the town's perception. A cursed woman didn't have healthy babies. A cursed woman didn't have a happy marriage and a prosperous ranch. Slowly, grudgingly, people began to accept that maybe they'd been wrong. Mrs. Patterson never apologized, but she stopped openly speaking against Penelope. Other townspeople began greeting her warmly when she came to town, asking after the baby, offering congratulations on how well the ranch was doing. It wasn't universal acceptance, but it was progress. Lily Henderson was Tommy's most devoted admirer outside the family. She visited whenever her father would bring her, carefully holding the baby under Penelope's supervision, singing to him in her clear young voice. Watching them together, Penelope thought about Tommy, her brother who'd never had the chance to grow up, and sent a silent prayer of thanks that his namesake would have friends and love and a long, happy life. Spring returned, bringing new calves and longer days. Tommy was sitting up now, babbling nonsense words that Fletcher swore were attempts at Papa and Mama. The ranch continued to prosper, the new barn standing proud, the cattle healthy, the land productive. One evening in May, almost a year after their wedding, Penelope and Fletcher sat on the porch watching the sunset, Tommy drowsing in her arms. Mr. Fairfield was inside reading, Rosa humming as she prepared tomorrow's bread. Everything was peaceful, perfect, whole. "Happy anniversary," Fletcher said, reaching over to take her hand. "Has it really been a year already? Best year of my life." He squeezed her fingers. "Do you remember what you said that day in town, that you thought you were cursed?" "I remember." It seemed like a lifetime ago now, that terrified girl who'd believed the whispers. "What do you think now?" Penelope looked at their son, at the ranch spread out before them, at the man beside her who'd given her everything she'd ever dreamed of and more. "I think I'm blessed. I think I'm the luckiest woman alive." "Not lucky," Fletcher corrected gently. "Deserving. You deserve all of this, Penelope. The happiness, the love, the family, you always did." "So do you," she said, leaning over to kiss him. "Thank you for seeing that in me. Thank you for not giving up, even when I wanted to run away." "I'll never let you run away," Fletcher promised. "You're stuck with me now." "Good," Penelope said, and meant it with her whole heart. The years that followed brought more blessings. When Tommy was 2, Penelope gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Rosa, who'd become like a mother to her. 2 years after that came another son, James, who had his father's blue eyes and sunny disposition. And 2 years after James came Catherine, a fierce little thing who reminded everyone of Fletcher's mother. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Fletcher expanded the operation, bought more land, built a new barn even bigger than the ones before. He became known throughout the territory as a fair boss and a shrewd businessman, someone whose word could be trusted, whose handshake was as good as a contract. Mr. Fairfield lived to see all 4 of his grandchildren, his health remaining stable for many years. He taught Tommy to ride, told Rose stories about her great-grandmother, bounced James on his knee, and let Catherine follow him everywhere despite her tendency to get into mischief. When he finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, it was surrounded by family in the house he'd built, on the land he'd loved. The whole territory came to his funeral, even Mrs. Patterson attended, and if she didn't speak to Penelope, at least she didn't speak against her either. It was as much peace as could be expected. Rosa stayed on long after she could have retired, claiming the children kept her young. She taught Rose to cook, helped Penelope manage the chaos of 4 active children, and remained the heart of the household until her own peaceful death many years later. Tom lived to be 82, still working the ranch almost to the end, teaching all the Fairfield children to ride and rope and care for the land. His funeral was nearly as large as Mr. Fairfield's, a testament to how many lives he'd touched. Through it all, Fletcher and Penelope's love deepened and grew. They had their disagreements, of course, their moments of frustration and fear. But they always came back to each other, always remembered the vows they'd made on that bright October morning, always chose love over everything else. The whispers about curses faded entirely as the years proved them wrong. The Fairfield ranch thrived. The children grew healthy and strong. Penelope became known as one of the kindest women in the territory, always ready to help a neighbor, always welcoming to those in need. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Fletcher took her back to the spot where they'd first met, where she'd ridden up looking for work all those years ago. The ranch had grown considerably since then, but the original building still stood, well-maintained and full of memories. "Do you remember what I said that day?" Fletcher asked, his hair now threaded with silver, his face lined but still handsome. "You said a lot of things. You were quite chatty, as I recall," he laughed. "I said I needed someone to help in the house." What I should have said was I needed someone to help fill my life. Someone to share it with, to build it with, to make it mean something beyond just work and responsibility. "And did you find what you needed?" Penelope asked, though she knew the answer. "I found everything I needed and more than I ever dared dream of. I found you, and you brought me happiness I didn't even know was possible." He took her hands, his grip still strong despite the years. "They whispered you were cursed to bring misfortune, but you brought me only happiness, Penelope. Only joy, only love. The best 20 years of my life have been these years with you." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, good tears, happy tears. "The best years of my life, too. You gave me a home when I had none, a family when I'd lost everything, hope when I'd given up on ever finding it again." "We gave that to each other," Fletcher said. "And we'll keep giving it every day for however many years we have left." They stood there in the place where it all began, watching the sun set over the land they'd built their life on, the land that would one day belong to their children and grandchildren, a legacy of love and hard work, and choosing to believe in happiness, despite all the reasons not to. In the distance, they could hear their children's voices, Tommy now 20 and helping run the ranch, Rose 17 and full of plans, James 15 and always laughing, Catherine 13 and fearless. 4 beautiful souls who'd never known hunger or loneliness or the weight of being unwanted. 4 reasons that the whispers had been wrong. "Ready to head back?" Fletcher asked. "I think I smell Rosa's anniversary dinner cooking. In a minute." Penelope leaned against him, his arm coming automatically around her shoulders. "I just want to stand here a little longer. To remember how far we've come, to be grateful for all of it." "I'm grateful every day," Fletcher murmured. "For you, for our family, for this life we've built. I wouldn't change a single moment. Not even the fire that destroyed the barn, not even that. It brought us together, didn't it? Made me finally tell you how I felt. I'd burn a dozen barns if it meant having you." Penelope laughed. "Let's not test that theory. One barn was quite enough drama for a lifetime." They walked back to the house hand in hand as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside, their family waited, the table set for celebration, the house filled with warmth and light and love. Rosa had outdone herself with the meal, and the children had made decorations, and there were gifts and laughter and stories late into the night. As Penelope looked around the table at her family, at the life she'd built from the ashes of loss and grief, she thought about the girl she'd been, riding into Tucumcari terrified and alone. That girl had believed she was cursed, had believed she didn't deserve happiness, had believed the whispers that followed her from town to town. But she'd been wrong. The whispers had been wrong. There was no curse, only the beautiful unpredictability of life, only the choice to keep going even when it seemed impossible, only the willingness to accept love when it was offered. Fletcher caught her eye across the table and smiled, that same transforming smile that had caught her heart all those years ago. And Penelope smiled back, grateful beyond measure for every moment, every choice, every step that had led her here. The children grew and eventually married, bringing new members into the family. Tommy married a schoolteacher from Santa Fe and took over running the ranch when Fletcher finally agreed to slow down. Rose married a lawyer and moved to Albuquerque but visited often with her growing brood. James became a horse breeder, using the skills his mother had taught him, and settled on land adjacent to the main ranch. Catherine, true to her fierce nature, became one of the first female doctors in New Mexico, though she always came home for holidays. Grandchildren came, filling the house with noise and energy again. Fletcher declared them all perfect, just as he had with his own children, and spent hours teaching them to ride, to rope, to love the land as he did. Penelope continued her work with the ranch, though she also found time for other pursuits. She helped establish a school in Tucumcari, served on committees to help new settlers, and became known for her kindness to those who were struggling or alone, remembering what it felt like to be lost and scared. On their 40th anniversary, their children threw them a party that seemed to include half of New Mexico. People came from miles around to celebrate, to honor the couple who'd built not just a successful ranch but a family known for their generosity and integrity. Fletcher gave a speech, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. 40 years ago, I met a woman who'd been told she was cursed, who'd been told she brought misfortune to all around her. And I want everyone here to know that in 40 years of marriage, she has brought me nothing but blessing, nothing but joy, nothing but love. He looked at Penelope, his eyes still the same clear blue despite the years. They whispered she was cursed to bring misfortune. I say she was blessed to bring happiness, and I was blessed beyond measure to be the one who got to share her life. The applause was thunderous, and Penelope stood to hug her husband, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she whispered in his ear. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after." "And I love you," Fletcher whispered back. "Forever and always." They danced that night, moving slower than they once had but still together, still in step, still choosing each other with every breath. Their children and grandchildren watched with smiles, seeing in them the kind of love that lasts, the kind of commitment that weathers all storms. As the years continued to pass, Fletcher and Penelope aged together gracefully. They took walks around the ranch each evening when the weather permitted, Fletcher's pace slower now but his hand still finding hers automatically. They sat on the porch in the mornings, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint the world in gold and pink. They told stories to their grandchildren, passing down the family history, making sure the younger generation knew where they came from. On a warm spring morning, when Penelope was 78 and Fletcher 80, they sat together in their usual spot on the porch. The ranch was bustling with activity, Tommy and his sons managing the daily operations with the same care Fletcher had always shown. "It's a good life we've built," Fletcher said, his voice softer now but still warm. "The best life," Penelope agreed, her hand in his. "I never imagined I could be this happy, this content. You ever think about those early days when you first arrived? Sometimes I think about how scared I was, how certain I was that I didn't deserve good things." She squeezed his hand. "I'm glad I was wrong. You were never cursed, my love. You were just waiting. Waiting for the right place, the right time, the right person to show you what you already were. Remarkable, strong, deserving of every happiness." "We were both waiting," Penelope said, "for each other." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, watching the cattle graze in distant pastures, watching the life they'd built continue and grow and flourish. The whispers that had once followed Penelope had long since faded, replaced by respect and affection. No one in Tucumcari or the surrounding territory would dare suggest she was cursed now. The evidence of her blessings was too overwhelming to deny. Fletcher lived to be 85, his mind sharp until the end despite his body's gradual failing. He died peacefully in his sleep, Penelope beside him as she had been for 57 years. His last words to her were, "Thank you for the happiness. Thank you for everything." The funeral drew people from 3 territories, a testament to the impact he'd had. Penelope stood surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, grieving but also grateful. Grateful for every year, every day, every moment they'd had together. She lived 5 more years after Fletcher's death, staying active and involved with the ranch and the family. She finally passed quietly one autumn evening, sitting in her favorite chair on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded her of her wedding day. They buried her beside Fletcher on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree they'd planted together in the early years of their marriage. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single inscription Fletcher had chosen years before. They said she brought misfortune. She brought only love. The Fairfield ranch continued for generations, passed down through Tommy's line, a testament to what Fletcher and Penelope had built together. Their story became legend in the area, a tale told to remind people that whispers and gossip mean nothing in the face of true love, that curses are only as real as you let them be, that happiness is something you choose every single day. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, ranch hands swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand across the pastures, or sitting together on the porch watching the sunset, well, they just smiled and went about their work. Some love, they said, was strong enough to last beyond death, beyond time, beyond anything the world could throw at it. Fletcher and Penelope Fairfield had that kind of love. The kind that started with a terrified woman looking for work and a kind man willing to see past the whispers. The kind that grew through shared labor and mutual respect. The kind that deepened into partnership and passion, and a commitment that weathered every storm. They'd built a life together on the New Mexico plains, raised children who carried their values forward, created a legacy that would last for generations. They'd proven that the cruelest whispers could be overcome, that supposed curses were nothing but fear and superstition, that happiness was always possible for those brave enough to reach for it. In the end, they'd had exactly what they'd promised each other on that bright October morning so many years ago. A life filled with love, purpose, and joy. A life that proved, beyond any doubt, that Penelope Parker Fairfield was never cursed at all. She was blessed. And so was anyone lucky enough to have known her.